Charlie Botnick here for the Pita Pit pregame with head coach Ricki Rothbauer. Now, coach, talked to you after the game against Chadron State and really talked about that game and taking a couple hours later and taking a look back at it. What do you really take away from that game? And now knowing you're playing CSU-Pubelo, what do you add on to that game?
Well, I mean, coming out of game one, like we talked about earlier, they really came out swinging the bats, and once they put us in a hole, we had a hard time with that. And when your opponent is that amped up and free swinging that early, that's going to be difficult. But you know, we're a young team, and this is a first playoff experience for us, and now we know what we're in for. We know what that atmosphere is going to be like. I was a little unhappy with how rushed we got in our pregame. The 12-minute early start, 12 minutes in a pregame, you know, normally we've got that last few minutes to really settle in and get refocused after we're warm. This was a little bit more rushed, and I think that hurt us a little bit. But on the whole, you know, switching to Pueblo, that's an opponent we haven't seen in months. So you went from somebody that we had seen 4 times in the past 3 or 4 days to now somebody we haven't seen in quite a while and who we have something to settle with. Their pitcher no-hit us in the regular season, and we weren't very happy with that. We didn't adjust well. We didn't make quick adjustments at the plate. So that's what we have to do now. So that's really the turning point as we, you know, switch directions and move forward.
And we talked about a little bit about CSU-Pubelo. You split that series 2-2, and like you said, pitching is going to be a factor tomorrow.
Definitely.
So how do you get your team prepared for that? And also, like you said, how important is that going to be for the game?
Well, I think for us, especially down the stretch, what we've been reminding our kids of is that they don't need to take such a big swing. It doesn't matter how big you swing if you swing and miss the ball. So we're working to really shorten up and get our eyes behind the ball and see it longer, especially with kids who throw off speed. And that's a lot of what Hope does. She's got that changeup that we really struggled with early in the year. So that's the adjustment we need to make. Shorten that swing up, recognize it, and be able to put it in play. We may not crush it every single time, but we can at least force them to make 2 plays instead of taking either the swing and miss or taking that pitch and having it still be in the zone.
Coach, you know, it's your first year in the RMAC tournament, and also some of these younger players, their first year. So how do you really cope with them being in this tournament for the first year, and really, how do you get all those nerves out?
Well, I mean, we were real excited this morning, and then we had the delay, and that was part of it, is saying like, okay, we got to reset, get refocused here, because you know we were up and ready to go, and now we're going to have a couple hours to wait. But you know, postseasons are just kind of quirky. You want to approach it with the same kind of evenness that you would any other series game, but it isn't quite a series game. You're not going to see the same team 4 times in a row. So that shift is difficult, and one that we're going to have to grow into as a group. I don't know that you ever get used to that in the postseason, the not knowing what your weekend's going to look like. But like I said, we're young, and this is our first go at it as a group, and hopefully we can grow off of that and be able to carry it forward through the coming seasons as well.
And Coach, you know, nowhere near the end of postseason, but taking a quick look back in the regular season, went 21-21 in the conference, but what game really stood out for you personally? The most memorable game for this regular season?
Most memorable game? That one's hard. We had a number of memorable games. I mean, the doubleheader that we had at home recently with Metro, both of those games are memorable because they're some of our lowest scoring games, which for me, as someone who played, you know, pre-composite bat era, those are the games that you really kind of pay attention to because it comes down to who executes. It's not as much, you know, dependent on the long ball and things like that. So that one stands out in my mind. We played some really good games at Chadron this past weekend. But even early in the season, the comeback against Fort Lewis, we had a number of games that were really strong and sort of showed where, you know, we've got some young kids ready to step up and do big things. So those are probably the ones that stand out the most in my mind at this point.
And talking about that and talking about CSU-Pubelo just a little more, defense definitely going to play a factor. This game, I think, or last game against Chadron only had around 3 errors. So what are you really telling your defense for this game? And also with this bigger field and the outfield, talked to Whitney Weber, said it's a hard adjustment, but, you know, how do you get them towards that adjustment?
Well, I mean, we've talked about this endlessly, that we've got to hold our ground a little bit longer before we make a decision on where to go. We had a couple of missteps early in the game on balls to the outfield where we misread, went in the wrong direction, and by the time we make the corrective read, the ball's past us. So for us, especially on those bigger fields where you've got more ground behind you that you've got to take an angle to, we need to make sure we're seeing that ball and getting a good read on the angle initially.
And the X factor, last question, the X factor for CSU-Pubelo will be what?
Ooh, that's a good one. Because for them, it's going to come down to pitching and defense. Both teams, I mean, neither team has a ton of speed. It's going to be who puts the ball in play and can move their runners around. And so for us, it's going to be finding ways to hit through that defense, knowing that they're used to playing on a bigger field. So the part of the game that we struggle with is one of their strengths because that's their everyday. So for me, those are the things we got to focus on to be successful tomorrow.
Well, there you have it. Head coach Ricki Rothbauer of your UCCS softball team taking on CSU-Pubelo tomorrow. Coach, good luck.
Thank you.